We are live here on the Not a Podcast show. I'm not a podcast host. Sean Ongley is the name, and you can find me on seanongley.com. You can find me on heldgear.com if you want to support my business. You can get all these shows, it's all free. So that's why I do the value for value practice of you make it work for you, whatever you find valuable out of this. And you can link up with me on seanongley.com. Uh, this show goes live to YouTube and Twitter randomly, no particular schedule. And this is the Hangover Show. I'm happy to be here with my old friend, John Paul Jenkins, back in Portland, Oregon again. I've tracked him through LA and he's been all over the world. Fascinating character. Let's bring him on. Oh, he goes by, I wonder what this sounds like. That's his thing then. You're listening to his music right now. All right. What's up, buddy?
Like,
This is just
I
gonna be
don't know what I'm supposed to do. I'm
supposed to,
oh, I'm in a box.
yeah, we are all in boxes. How's it going, dude?
It's good. It's good. It's beautiful morning here in Portland, Oregon. I'm house sitting my friend's house and just kind of enjoying the weekend. I
You
have a
doing some
pretty
house
chill day
sitting?
ahead of me.
It's funny, I'm doing some
Yeah,
house sitting too, starting
yeah,
tomorrow.
yeah. I like it. It's kind of like, I mean, I'm only literally like what 8 blocks from my own house, but I'm like, ooh, I'm on vacation.
Because it's like a nicer house, right?
Yeah, it's a nicer house, but also like it's just not my house. And even if it wasn't a nicer house, I'd be like kind of happy to just be somewhere else, you know? It's like just a little chance to get out, be
Yeah.
in another sort of place.
What neighborhood you in?
Uh, I guess technically this is Cully, so it's sort of deep northeast. I'm on 82nd and Killingsworth-ish area.
82nd. See, that used to be no
Yeah.
man's land. I've
Hmm.
been equating Philadelphia to Portland a lot lately, in terms of like watching the gentrification happen because I've been here about 4 years
Sure.
now. And
Sure,
it's
yeah.
like I live out on what I think is equivalent to 82nd in this city.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because like people say that, but like most younger people that I speak to, most people that are like buying their first home or whatever are buying out on like in what they call the numbers, like and like buying out on 182nd, buying out on
Oh yeah,
122nd, like 100, 200, like way out in Gresham. Like I mean, and in a
absolutely.
way, like when you go out there, it's actually really nice. Like there's like really nice places, and it's kind of beautiful. And like by my own standards, like living in LA for a while, like people are like in Portland, it's like if it's more than like a 20-minute bike ride to somewhere, people are just like, oh, I can't do this. That's just
Mhm.
crazy. That's way too far,
Yeah.
and like I know someone that I work with that lives like in the Mount Hood area, and it's like a 45-minute drive for her to get into work. And I'm like, holy shit, you live in the wilderness in a cabin, and it's a 45-minute commute. That's like less than my commute was in LA.
Does she actually have to commute though? Like every day?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, she works 4 days a week because she works 4 tens because that's like what the thing is. So in that way, I think it's a little easier. But like, and also like her commute is at 6 in the morning, because like we work early, so it's a little bit different.
Mm.
I mean, it's like if she was driving at like, if she was trying to get into town like 8:30, it'd probably be closer to like an hour and 15 or something.
Oh,
But you know,
that's
but still, like, I mean, dude, whatever the case may be, 45 minutes to be in the middle of fucking nowhere.
oh yeah, that's great.
That's like,
Yeah. I mean, that was like the magic of the barn, the fact that that
yeah,
farm
yeah,
was in the city technically,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
an old man was biking his way into town from there,
yeah, yeah,
or taking the bus usually,
yeah,
right? Until I
yeah,
became his driver, talking
yeah,
about
yeah,
Shane. uh,
Yeah.
which kind of connects to like my role in the Sex Fucks band. I was
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Yeah.
driver
Yeah.
of Shane
Yeah. Basically,
and
I
the
know.
floor hype. I was the dance floor hype guy.
Yeah.
Remember that? I was all about dancing
Yeah.
at
Everyone
the
was.
Sex
I
Fucks
mean,
show.
yeah. It was.
Well, it
I
was
don't know. It's
weird
funny.
music to dance to. I don't know if I how well I would dance to it today. Like I
I don't
was
know.
out last
Like,
night and I just like the DJs here in this town a lot. That's why I'm hungover. And
oh yeah,
it's like I like that. I don't know if I could dance to Sex Fucks again. Maybe we'll see.
you can dance to anything, man.
You
There's
can
if there's
move. You can
rhythm,
move. Yeah.
if there's rhythm, there's dance. You
Yeah.
know, and what there is in sex fucks is a lot of rhythm. I
Yeah.
mean, it's you know, I think
Cascades.
I think it's interesting. You know, like we just played a show this weekend at the Dundee Lodge camp out, and
Right. Yeah. What's that all about?
uh,
Huh?
it's actually really cool. It's this thing set up by this guy. I think his name's Eric, and then Keelan Mayer, who's like it's like a local. She's been in a bunch of bands. She's rad, and like she actually sat in with us, but uh, they've been doing it for about 5 years now, and it's kind of I don't know, like it's like one third sort of like experimental, one third sort of like freak folk type stuff, and one third like sort of like indie rock or like whatever, and then there's like or like I mean the whole vibe is kind of punk in a way, and then there's DJs as well and like art, and it's relatively small. There was like what I think maybe like 600-800 people there.
That's
um
pretty good though. That sounds like a
yeah,
fun
it was
group.
great. I mean, honestly, it was one of the best weekends I've had in like in years. I mean, it was
Yeah.
incredible. It was so positive. There was like tons of kids. There was just like a lot of good energy. There wasn't, like sometimes at festivals you kind of get this like, you get like people who have like done too many drugs or who are like just drinking too much and getting like argumentative or like, you get like kind of like fucked up energy, and it just wasn't that at all. Like it was so chill. It was so nice. It
Yeah.
was like
That's great.
there was like a lake nearby where you could swim, it was like it was just
Yeah.
it was great, and all the music was
Community.
incredible. Yeah, yeah, really, very much
Y-
so.
Yeah.
There's so many people there that I hadn't seen in like 10, 15 years that I was like, holy shit, what the fuck? What are you
It's,
doing?
it's the best. I
Yeah,
mean, I'm in this process of meeting new people, but
yeah,
I see a lot of that and it's really touching. Like I
yeah,
Philadelphia is a rough place and it's you can if you don't find good people, you might as well not live here. Like if you don't find a community here, you might as well not live here. It's not like worth it.
yeah,
Um, but the people that I've been meeting and what I'm seeing and the way they support each other and stuff, it's cool. Like
yeah,
eh, and people are excited. I think it's 2022. We felt like we all went on pause in 2020, and it's like it's kind of mind blowing. It's like the 2 years essentially. It didn't. It just. It's not that it disappeared or something. It's just got really murky and strange, and put a lot of people's lives on hold and efforts and plans. Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
I
it's
mean,
like
I think it shifted a lot of people's perspective. It also immiserated a lot of people. I mean, I think not just in a personal way, but in like a really deep financial way. Like I mean, the flip side of it was, like in Portland at least, like the homeless population has gone up like 3, 4 times what it was. Like it's
yeah.
so
I
there's
It's weird.
lots of sort of pressures.
Yeah, I found more prosperity in Philly than I did Portland. I mean, I found amazing opportunities, and I would never regret anything I did. Uh, but it's like it's financially, it was always getting a step ahead of me. Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
I think when you buy a house, when it's a stabilizing factor. But a friend of mine bought a house in Portland, for 2 bedroom, like 800 square foot house.
yeah,
It's like off MLK, which is a great area, but
sure,
wasn't that long ago.
yeah,
444,000 is what that number was. and that's
Yeah,
just
that's cheap. I mean, for Portland, like that's cheap. Like
I
I know,
I
it's
have a
kind of insane, but
3-bedroom house for under 6 figures, what I like, it's
yeah,
but that too is not possible since I've been here.
yeah.
So, everything's just, you know,
Um,
the
I
farmland.
mean, my girlfriend's house went up in value. I think she said like by 50 grand in less than a year.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I mean, that's Portland. Like, it's weird, man. Portland average house prices have gone up something like like between, I think the numbers like between 12 and 20% every year since the start of the pandemic.
How does, how does that make any sense? Does it make any sense to you?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's what capitalism does, right? I mean, I mean, look, the guy who started WeWork is essentially creating a new company that is the same thing as what is it called, BlackRock or whatever, like the people who are buying up all the private homes. Like, there's all these major corporations that are putting pressure on the economy, and they're buying up all these private homes. Like, that's the point of them. Like, BlackRock owns what, like something like 13% of private homes in the country or something crazy. Like, I don't know if it's that high, but it's or that low. I don't know. I don't know what the number is, but I know it's a major proportion of private homes in the country. And there are other companies that are seeing that model, following it, and the whole point, and the stated point by a lot of these guys is to make everyone in America a
A
renter.
renter.
Yeah.
You will own
Um,
nothing and you will be happy.
and so, when you look at it in those terms, like, does it make moral sense? No. Does it make like, is this what the function of the way we set up the economy? Well, yeah, absolutely, yes. This is why I mean, this is why the economy is set up the way it is, 100%, and
Yeah.
has been since the beginning. It's like we had this idea of like the founding fathers, but no, the founding fathers were just like rich dudes who didn't want to get taxed and came to a new country to exploit free resources. I mean, so it's like it's like
Well,
it's
they
like people
did
are like, well,
set
let's.
up okay. The I
I mean, sure,
they
there was like
set
other
up
freedoms and blah blah blah, whatever, but like fundamentally, really rich people who wanted to
yeah.
exploit really poor people.
And
Like,
that was the absolute
that's the arc.
dynamic. That's been the dynamic. It's always
Yeah,
been the dynamic since like basically the introduction of surplus. As soon as people possess the land and then they have a surplus of goods and then they take
yeah,
advantage of
yeah,
then they get more lands and it just I can see how these things evolve from a more anarchistic free market capitalism to also a state supported system. Some things I I don't research, but I think about is like what laws have changed. Was there a time when you couldn't be a corporation and just buy up a bunch of private property? Because
oh yeah,
the
sure,
state could
yeah,
change that.
yeah,
This
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I mean, there was a time where it was illegal for a CEO to make more than, I think, like, I forget, it was like more than like 30 times what the lowest paid person in their company made.
was that a
Um,
law or just a
yeah,
natural thing that
no,
was in
that was a law. I mean, there was ways of skirting it. Like, I mean, like a lot of companies like hired um, major, especially during the Reconstruction, a lot of and starting the Reconstruction, but actually it hasn't stopped. Hired a lot of prisoners, and so like that was kind of an exempt status for stuff like that. You could pay basically the prisoners nothing. It was essentially like there's this
yeah
great book by this I forget what the guy's name is, but it's called Slavery by Another Name, and essentially it just sort of tracks the reinstatement of slavery through prison work um, post Civil War.
right yeah yeah absolutely
And it's just,
absolutely
I mean, it's all the same shit, but
it's all the power. The thing is that I think this is the most dangerous thing to challenge. It's just the power structure. Like we can approach it from I'm historically more left wing, but now I'm more like just kind of like finding a whole new ground that nobody really agrees with. No group agrees with me on. I definitely don't want the government to have so much power to support these kinds of terrible economies. I think that we put too much, we give them too much money. So yeah, I agree with the founding fathers. I don't want so much taxes going to a big centralized power. Uh, things definitely need to be like I know, again, something that nobody really agrees with me on. The joke: capitalism and socialism are the two best economic systems that nobody's tried. Every Everybody thinks of China as a communist or socialist, right? There's never been a properly socialist government that I've seen. I've seen I've heard of things like Madrigal in Spain. That's more of like a cooperative sort of micro government in a way. Um, Things like that seem to be successful, but centralized power always corrupts, whether it's capitalism or socialism. Capitalism should have a way of balancing itself out, but the state has a way of intervening, and then
Well, the state needs to intervene. I mean, the state,
the
because
communities need to intervene. Is my point.
well, because actually what we have is a free market. Like we've been moving towards an extremely free market, and
Highly
what ends up,
regulated in the
but
wrong ways.
it's not the thing is
In
like
all the
it's not
wrong
that
ways.
regulated because those regulations are defined by corporations, and so those corporations
Exactly.
essentially, well, but the point is those corporations are essentially freeing up the regulations. They are making it deregulated in their
But at
benefit.
the same
Like
time,
that
at the same
regulation,
JP,
so the way that stuff works is essentially like we actually have much more free regulation than we had in like the 70s or in the 30s or even going back further, in the like 1800s.
I
And
think
essentially what we're seeing now is actually an opening of regulations, of like a much freer regulations as far as quote unquote capitalism. But the problem is that it what we're not really acknowledging is that when you have a lack of government involvement in business, you actually that is to the benefit of the average person. You actually have more monopolies. You have more consolidation of power in the business world. That is the nature of capitalism, is to consolidate power in people who have the most money. And so as people have more and more money, they have more and more power. And that power actually creates a sort of like sense of like almost like a planetary gravity of power that affects all of the things around it. And so the idea of like they become the regulations, like just through influence, and laws become sort of irrelevant and circle around that, and don't actually like the conversation of like government versus business. I don't think is that useful. Like to me, what I think is more useful is what is the power source in the entire world, and it's always money, right? And so money
now that's the lubricant,
essentially,
not the power
no,
source.
but no, well, okay, you can say whatever you like. Okay, you can use semantics, but like the people with the most money have the most power, and that's not a coincidence. That's
Yeah.
because that money is the source of their power. that
All right.
that money actually
All right.
creates
Let me
that power.
let me get in
And
here. Let me.
so the laws circle that.
Yeah.
They don't circle governments.
All right. All right.
And
Yeah, I get
so
it.
like,
Let me in here.
yeah.
All right. The power is so much deeper than money. Money is a part of it, but it's like it's information, it's property, it's like really like obscure shit that a lot of people don't think about. But if you are up top, then you're totally concentrating on it. It's
But
money.
without money, would they have that power?
Money is the big lubricant. It's the thing that if the more of that you have, the more power you have. But you can actually
So it's the
possess
source of
power.
power.
Hold on. There are other angles to power than just money. You have influence, information. You can be dirt poor, but have certain key information, certain key platform. You're gonna have a platform. There's all kinds of ways to possess power. Money is a massive, probably but if we focus on that, you follow the money. It's a great way to investigate things. but I don't think it's the my headphones. I don't think it's like the only thing to focus on. So, but then also going back to regulation, if we look at not just how deregulated the big banks are, but then also look at how overregulated small business is, you find that the government sets up all kinds of barriers to entry. And yes, the laws are have
Sure.
become uh, a in orbit of these super massive banks, these super massive corporations. But that's something that, as the people, we should have control over, and we don't because of the centralized power. So
Yeah, we
I
should.
think that
Yeah, I guess.
communities need to be able to intervene as they choose. If you live in a community where there's fracking, you should be able to intervene where when that's hurting your groundwater and whatnot.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, and the laws are set up by increasingly centralized power structures that make it harder for communities. So
Yeah.
what I find valuable about the liberty community, that the people who the left and most people in Portland think are alt-right lunatics, who, when I talk to, who are the easiest people to get on my show, by the way, because people on the left don't like, I don't know, I can't seem to get them to agree to do the show for the most part. And conversations on Twitter are much more difficult with them. Like, it's very interesting to me. So the people on the supposed right, in the more libertarian world, I really value this notion that we need to get to a more anarchistic, more old school, uh, like old American ways, but now with all of the civil liberties that give us equality and all that kind of good stuff that was
I
lacking back
don't
then.
think those old American ways didn't exist. Like that's not a thing, you know. Like I
Yeah,
mean,
but
that's
it
all. That's
existed
all I've.
for
That's
it
all I've
existed for a
done over the
subset of
last
people,
like.
but it
But the
exists.
thing is like it. Sure, freedom exists for people who have the money, who have the power. I mean, that's the thing. Is like the idea of libertarianism is hilarious, and like every example of a libertarian like sort of like place that people have like tried to do essentially has ended up in hilarious like just fucking results like that small town in New Hampshire where a bunch of libertarians took over city hall. They essentially defunded the entire city. They deregulated everything, and what happened? The trash stopped getting picked up and bears moved in,
Yeah,
and
it's foolish. You
people
can't
started to be like,
just,
oh my god,
but
like,
you also
oh, what's
can't
happening
just
with the
flip.
bears?
You also just can't
um
flip any kind of revolution like that is messy, and it was probably a very fool's errand
no,
kind
it
of
was
thing.
it was literally
Dysfunctional.
like it was well no what it was libertarianism by the book. It was total freedom. It was we don't want government laws invading our space. And
Yeah,
what you realize is that what you end up with there is no functional roads, no public transportation, no public trash pickup. You end up with all of these things that we think of as sort of being background states that we take for granted. But when you really look at city policies or state policies or government or like country policies, they're actually super fucking important. The reason we don't have the Chicago fire anymore on the level that it happened is because of government involvement in rules of how to build things. Like, and so we can say, oh, we want all these rules to go away because like it's invading our freedom to like make money, blah blah blah. But like fundamentally, like those rules have over history come into place because of very particular reasons, because we don't want bears in our city. You know what I mean? Like, and those things are things that like so often kind of get sidelined by people who have sort of more libertarian views. And it's like the reality is that like when you sure you can say in an ideal world, when if you live out in the country and there's like 40 people on a plot of land, you could be libertarian. When there's 20 million people in a city, not possible.
yeah, I
Just
agree.
not
I
possible, like
agree.
not even close to possible.
So I'll offer this observation. I've noticed a lot of libertarians who are really hell bent on the idea of flipping the government, defunding everything and whatnot. They sometimes even work for government. I've seen.
Sure,
They work for big companies. They complain about what they don't have control of in their personal lives or things like that. I see that they don't live a standard that I consider, like, I've kind of lived a pretty anarchistic life myself, like I slept on your floor many times because I was
sure,
like, I refused to work for these big companies. I refused all these years. I've refused to work for a company that I feel like does poor, is bad for the community. And it's basically been an ipso facto pledge of poverty. But I've turned that around and now I understand a little bit more, but I still live by that because I just understand the importance of stewardship of our own communities, and the libertarian ideal can get really carried away and say, oh, well, you should privatize the roads and whatnot. And yeah, when you look at Philly's roads, you're like, yeah, they're not spending this money like correctly somehow. There's some corruption going on. There's someone's on the take because this shit's done so
sure.
poorly.
Yeah,
Um, and that's kind of like a classic trope about Philly in a way, but I'm not going to get into that. Uh, the I guess what I'm getting at is I'm a decentralist, is what I kind of like call myself these days. It's not right or left. I just think we need to take the power in back increasingly into our communities, and like more worker owned companies, more more representation, better representation, not so much federal. Uh, uh, the federal power, I think, is pretty. It's necessary, but for a reason. But then it's like giving them all this money and watching them send it off to these wars and stuff like
sure. I
this.
mean,
It's
look,
just
there are problems. There are problems with all systems, right? Local
yeah.
systems. With local systems, you end up with abortion bans. With federal systems, you end up with money going to major wars because individual people have, like, more access to making those decisions. I mean, I think that really, you know, the
You
problem
know,
I have with a lot of our country and a lot of the way we talk about this stuff is that people are woefully uninformed, actually. They get most of their politics from Twitter or memes. And, like, people will talk about Marx, for instance, but how many people who talk about Marx have even read the, like, Communist Manifesto, much less Capital, you know? Which is like a what? Like a 2 volume, 1,500 page book, that is actually an incredibly complex treatise on fucking, an analysis of how money works. And I think that what we're in a place now where people are sort of like reactionary without understanding the complex systems. And I think that having an emotional reaction to a complex system is like trying to feel your way out of something you thought your way into. And the fact is that, like, not possible, like just not possible. Like, you might feel bad about how the federal government works, but if you don't understand it, then you need to shut the fuck up and leave
you
it to
you
people who understand it.
and you agree
You know what
with
I mean?
you apply that to everybody across the board, of course, right? Because like most people are arguing that haven't read a
Yeah,
single
I mean,
document on
the
capitalism.
sure, sure. My thing is this, is that actually most people I've met on the left have read a lot more than most people I've met on the right or libertarians. Like, they actually, like, when I see, like, leftists on Twitter, like it's shocking, like 20-year-olds who, like, have literally, like, internalized Capital and have fucking, like, have gotten it, have read, like, Deleuze and Guattari, have, like, are actually, like, have a fucking really deep understanding of, like, the sort of philosophies and the, like, structures in place around it, and I think that, like, what we live in now is a time of sort of, what I see it as is I
Don
think we live in
Quixote.
a time. I think we live in a time. Yeah, kind of Don Quixote. It's in the sense, but in the sense of, like I think we live in a time of sort of resentment. and reactionary resentment. And so people see little things and they get resentful of it. They get mad. And then they try and turn that into a political ideology.
Yeah, yeah,
And
I see
and
that.
a political ideology is actually something that you gain from an education. And nobody's fucking educating themselves. They're
Well,
just resentment. They have some resentments. They're like,
yeah,
I'm mad about I'm mad because I was driving to work and somebody cut me off in their fancy car. We shouldn't have those kinds of cars. You
yeah,
know, like that's
yeah,
literally like 90% of our fucking political
yeah,
discourse today.
right.
And it's fucking sad,
No, yeah,
because
it gets ridiculous all the time. I agree. One thing I want to, I think is a drawback to the communities. Yeah, communities being able to govern themselves. That like you're observing. It could be abortion bans. I know most libertarians that I talk to on Twitter that I don't think I don't hear them say that like that medical practice shouldn't be there. It's like most think that that's between the doctor and the patient, and the privacy between the doctor and the patient is bottom line. That's how I look at it.
I don't know, man. I have no time for libertarians. I hate that shit, because
See,
to me,
that's the wrong
every
view,
time.
dude.
Well,
Because
my thing is
I
my
have
thing is
time for
this like
everybody. My experience
my thing
here is
about
that I
every.
can't get lefties to join this show because and get on
But
just
that's your
have a
personal resentment. Listen to
no, no,
that.
no, it's not.
Like that's literally
I'm
like
not
the
resentful
point you're
about it.
making there is you're like, oh, like lefties don't want to join my show.
Be No, it's
So
not
what?
resentment. It's just a fact, and it's unfortunate because I reach out and I try to get it done. So I'm trying to do a
You
show,
got
right?
one. I'm a
Yes, you
lefty. I'm
do. I
wearing
know, but
fucking
we're an
red.
old
Yeah,
friend. You're an old friend,
yeah,
so I feel comfortable having
yeah,
this argument. But I
yeah.
think that a lot of people are uncomfortable with just the idea that you might sit across from somebody and have a different perspective, and there's no way we can advance in a uniform way. It's never going to be that way. So it's always going to be a matter of cooperation and 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 consent. So I think that like whatever our it's like, yeah, we need to educate ourselves better, and our system, our media, our government, it's all failing us on those levels. People are getting shoved through the public school system. They're graduating unable to read. Philadelphia has an incredibly awful record. Um,
Well, I guess I would say this. Um, my political ideology is one of absolute mutual aid. In other words, the larger community, whether you want to call that the government or whatever, coming to the aid of the individuals and strengthening the structure that facilitates that mutual aid. The main difference that I have with a lot of Republicans and libertarians is that the main sort of focus of that is personal freedom, is about their personal movement through the world. And I'm not interested in that. I find that actually to be anathema to what is actually a way of creating a community movement through the world. Because so often, when you have a personal movement through the world, your choices are going to come in conflict with things that are good for the community. And one of the problems with a lot of people on the right, a lot of libertarians, is that they say those two things are the same thing. But that is actually like very much a kind of American, a very quintessential sort of individualistic way of looking at it. It's like, I want my own house. I want my own car. I want my own, like I want my own street. I want blah, blah, blah. I. And from my perspective, we should be living in houses together because for the first million years, that's what humans did. We should be living in communities together where we share implements, where we share knowledge, where we share ideas, where we share our space, where we share. And that's where you get actual engagement with people that are different than you. I grew up in a commune, and so I had to live with people who are very different than me. And we don't have that now. We have separation in little boxes, in houses all over the place. And what that breeds is a sense of my little world is important, and the issues that I have, I need to like put out into the world and like find and grab. And that's because we live in this capitalist system, it supports that 100%. And we sort of internalized that ideology and created it and try to reproduce it constantly. And we find ways to reproduce it using sort of semantics, but like actually like it's just kind of the same shit, like, and to me, I'm like, no libertarian's going to want to live in a communal house. You know
That's
what I mean?
actually
Like,
not true. It's a
for the
very,
most part,
it's a very
that's
wide
like, that's
scope.
not a thing. I mean,
Maybe
sure,
maybe I
okay.
hang
I'm not
out. Maybe
saying
I hang
no,
out more with
no,
anarchists. Maybe it's more of an anarchist thing than
possibly,
the
yeah,
libertarian, because there's a lot of anarchists who their only real place to go is a libertarian party and whatnot. And I'm not in that party. I don't belong to any political party. Never have. I only switched to Democrat to vote for Bernie, and I've since switched back to independent. And I didn't vote, and I've been voting third party, and I'm just not in those I'm not in that box. And I agree with that. It's like I it's tough. I mean, I have like members, I have families, cousins and relatives in Pennsylvania and in Arizona that live a lot more like that. The generations are they're more of a tighter unit,
yeah, yeah,
and but it's, I guess I grew up in that liberal way with my parents. They moved out to California and separated us from the family, and I've been really kind of working through, like, what did that do to me? What did that do to me? Not having that those generations around, cousins around,
yeah, yeah,
and being raised in a cult. You were
yeah.
raised in a commune, by the way. So tell us about the commune. Where was that?
It was all over the place. It was a lot of people in it were ex SDS members, Students for Democratic Society.
What is that?
And
Students for Democratic
see,
Society.
that's like, it's hilarious that you don't know that.
Yeah.
This is kind of like what I think is funny about sort of the historical perspective of like knowledge in our current culture. So the SDS was one of the largest, if not the largest, left-wing group in America. When you talk about like the March on Washington in the 60s, when you talk about like the Democratic was it, yeah, I think it was the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, the big riots. Um, when you talk about like people trying to levitate the Pentagon, like all these like classic moments in history. You talk about Martin Luther King. Like, who was Martin Luther King working with in the white community? Like white kids. Like, that was SDS. It was Students for a Democratic Society.
I think
The
have, have,
Weathermen. When Students for a Democratic Society collapsed, the Weathermen came out of that.
do you watch
Um,
Adam Curtis documentaries?
yeah, yeah,
Did he ever
yeah.
talk about them?
Sure, he's mentioned them. Yeah,
Okay, yeah, I think I've
yeah.
heard of
I
them
mean,
too. Yeah.
everybody's mentioned them. So one of the interesting things about the SDS is that a lot of people came out of it that were very kind of disillusioned. As the SDS was infiltrated by the CIA and the FBI, and a lot of the sort of like the structural system of the US very much did all it could to undermine any kind of leftist expression in the US, and has been doing since the
I'm gonna,
1800s,
and
like,
I just want to add, it's been done to all kinds of people's movements, religious movements, pretty
sure,
much any
yeah, but
time.
it's been primarily focused on the left, like the Red Scare. There wasn't like a black scare, as far as like like, or whatever you want to call, like the anarchists, like, I don't
As
mean
you
black
notice,
as in like African American.
the libertarians don't organize. They, as you notice in your example of that city. So I
Sure.
think, but the
Um,
leftists have a way of getting together and making a lot of noise.
and
Uh,
and 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 getting together and getting us like the 8-hour work week, or the 8-hour work day, and getting together and getting us, getting kids out of fucking, working in mines and shit. I mean, the left is responsible for almost every single aspect of like workers' rights. Like, that's just fact. That's just like That's just the way it works. You know, the IWW was a basically like a communist organization for years. You know, the Communist Party of America is like major influence. So anyway, the SDS, my parents came out of that. You know, the SDS collapsed. They were like, what can we do? You know, so they joined this organization that started doing literacy stuff in Chicago. They worked in like South Chicago, in like really poor neighborhoods, and taught people how to read and write and whatever. And then from there, the organization spread out and started doing stuff all over the world. Um, and
So
um,
what was a commune like?
well, you know, like there was probably like, I don't know, like 10,000 people in the organization. And so there were houses all over the world that people lived in communally. Um, and so there was a big like apartment, sort of like a huge apartment complex in Chicago that had like, I don't know, like I don't even remember, like maybe 3,000 people living in it that were all part of this organization. And then each house in different parts of the world would have like multiple families living in it, kind of like doing whatever the job was at that particular place, you know. And so we moved, you know, once every year, once every 2 years, and you know, I'd end up in a new place with new kids, new families, you know, just kind of, and it was just sort of like, okay, we're here to like, we moved to Peru. It's like, okay, we're here to help them, you know, help this small village, like set up a local sustainable business, build a school, you know, like try and get electricity to the thing, and like work with local government, work with like NGOs and religious organizations to like, you know, fund things and like bring, you know, sort of skills and money into the community, and find ways to kind of facilitate the goals of the community. So get like a community leaders together and be like, hey, what do you guys want to see here? You know, that was a lot of I mean, a lot of the work was very much mutual aid. And I mean, it's, you know, it's just classic, the same shit that the like Black Panthers were doing, same shit the SDS was doing, same shit that all these groups were doing, just like, you know, food pantries, like all that shit, you know, same
It's
shit.
it's it's I hear that kind of talk a lot. Like there's a lot of appreciation for the Black Panthers coming out of the new right wing, the new anarchist libertarians.
What do you mean the new right wing?
That not these that those the what we're talking about left versus right. We're talking about libertarians. These younger uh kind of people that identify conservative take a lot from the Black Panther movement, and they want to organize like this. And I think that there's a lot of too much dissonance about. I think if people did hang out more in
Which is,
communities and
yeah,
talk
sorry,
more
go
in
ahead.
town halls and actually cooperate and have conversations, I think it would really compromise a lot of these ideals into something that could actually work. But the power structure is always going to resist all of that kind of organization, because it definitely needs us um, to move in a certain direction. That's why we're called sheeple.
Sure.
That's why we're pawns.
Well, I think it's interesting, you know, I don't think you can like cherry pick ideologies when it comes to stuff like the Black Panthers, because, you know, the Black Panthers were first and foremost a Marxist organization, and then they were a Black Power organization. And most of the early Black Panthers that you talk to, like that was the deal. Like they were Marxist, and they were, you know, even when you look on the Wikipedia, it says, you know, it says the Black Panthers, a Marxist Black Power organization. And I think that it's the Marxism, it's the actual explicit um, using of Marx's ideas that created the framework and the sort of impetus, but also the ways of thinking about creating these community centers, and the reason, not just the reasons for it, but also how to do it. You know what I mean? Like the actual mechanics of it. And you can't really take that, you can't take the Marx out of that framework, out of that practice. You know, and that's what a lot of people try to do. Like there's this whole the guy so there's a new podcast about the weathermen. You know, like I don't know, do you know who the weathermen are?
Not no, not really.
So the Weathermen were basically like a terrorist organization, a left-wing terrorist organization in the U.S. that came out of the SDS. They blew up, they like bombed the fucking Pentagon. They blew up a bunch of police stations all over the country. They were like, this crazy, like, very active, very like successful in certain ways, terrorist organization. And, I was listening to an interview with the guy on I forget what it was, on Democracy Now, I think. And he's talking about interacting with the Black Panthers. They interviewed a bunch of Black Panthers. He's talking about like working with people in SDS and blah blah. Never once mentioned communism or Marx. And I was like, bro, literally every single person who you interviewed, that's where they got their ideology. And I was like, it's so interesting that media at this point is really just like, we can't talk about that. Don't say those words. We want to frame it in a more sort of holistic thing. And it's like, no, fuck that, dude. Like, do you really think that any Black Panther back in the day was not like very explicitly saying, no, this is the legacy. This is where I learned my practice. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
Mao, Lenin, fucking like all those motherfuckers, and it's like, but somehow because in America we've spent, the last 100 years demonizing that shit, we're not allowed to talk about it anymore. And what's cool is that like,
It's a lot we're not
what do
allowed
they
to
say?
talk about. That's for sure. We're definitely
Yeah,
guided, and the power sets the table. And I think the a lot of this respect for the Black Panthers on the right is from the Black conservatives like Hoteps, and they like. So yeah, you could say that it's cherry picking, but I think what I'm trying to get at is the the shared value there is a resistance to power. They didn't trust the government. They wanted their own arms. They didn't trust the
sure.
government. They wanted their own education. So this is the kind of values that I think that we can get together on, but it's going to be a lot of arguing to get there. I just wanted to like get into how that shaped your perspective, because you grew up in that communal way in a way that most people don't, and that's a
Yeah,
valuable part of this conversation that should not be
yeah,
neglected. Um,
yeah.
yeah, is there? I mean, how is there anything like? I know you moved around. Where was that?
Yeah.
You, you moved
We
around
lived
Europe,
in India, Peru, Japan, Hong Kong,
all within this like decentralized commune.
yeah,
See, that's
Italy,
fascinating.
yeah. Um, I think what it did for me was I mean, in a lot of ways, I think what it did was it made me realize that like individualism is a weakness, communalism is a strength. And I could see that, once we left and we lived in a small apartment, it was brutal, you know, like not sharing meals, much more difficult, like the financial pressures were just like got huge, the capacity to actually like get things done, was more difficult. Um, sure, there was sort of more, in a way, like personal freedom, I guess, but in other ways, there was less personal freedom because you had less time, you had less capacity to kind of like pursue the goals that you might want to pursue,
Absolutely. If it's
Uh,
annoying, it's an annoying aspect of the society that we've got set up.
yeah, I mean, when you have to work this much more to do stuff, it becomes difficult. I mean, there's like, I think about this, like, why is it that most people in Russia fucking hate Gorbachev, like, and want to go back to Soviet, like, Russian era? Like, kind
I'd
of
like.
interesting,
I've
right?
never really studied that. I
I mean,
wonder.
it's kind of fascinating. Like,
I think it's
that's a
even.
very, very common refrain. And like, I've watched a bunch of different sort of travel shows and interviews of just average people on the street. And these are from people who tend to be like kind of conservative, like travel people. And yet that's what they come across
So
over and over again.
why do you believe that? Do you believe that every election is just set up and designed in every possible way to keep Putin in power?
Uh, sure. Yeah. I mean, I think that like the electoral process in almost every country in the world is flawed. I mean, you know,
How about ours? Do you
like,
think ours is legit?
like, no, I mean, dude, how do you, okay, look, if I
I know you
said,
don't vote, right?
I have voted at various points. If I said you have a choice between vanilla and chocolate ice cream,
Yeah, yeah.
and I asked every person in America, do you think it would come out to a 51 to 49% ratio? Hell no. There's no question that you ask of a binary thing that's going to come out to that close of a ratio. It just is not possible over 350 million people. Not possible. Like not possible. And
Well,
so
it's
so then
interesting.
what
I
is
don't
the
know.
mechanism that comes into play through that? Like, I mean, you know, it's just like you especially when you ask the same question about different things, like different candidates. So it's like one year it's chocolate versus vanilla, the next year it's peanut butter versus almond butter, the next year it's, you know what I mean, and like, and yet somehow every single time the percentage difference is like single digits, and it's like, how is that possible? Like, that's the shit I ask, you know. I'm like, this is weird, this seems like a very strange, like, you know. And then you like start to dig into the mechanism and you're like, oh, there's like all these financial things going on, there's all this, you know. What I think honestly is like two things. First of all, I think anybody who's in government should not be allowed to be in any kind of business relationship within 5 years either side of their of like 5 years after their government service. Like, and after that, none of the business that they're involved in should be allowed to overlap with any of the stuff they did in their government service. That would certainly change a lot of how
Yeah,
government
we wouldn't
works.
have Nancy
Um,
Pelosi.
we wouldn't have anyone in government, literally not a single person, because
Yeah,
that is why you get into government for the
yeah,
most part, you know.
yeah.
Um,
It's
you
amazing
know,
to just
like,
watch. It's amazing to watch like people get in there and just get corrupted so fast. I don't
yeah,
know if that's just
overnight,
the
yeah,
gaslighting of every campaign, but there's so many people that I've seen that on the left a lot, and then on the right a little. I don't really pay that much attention to Republicans, but they I've seen good and well-intentioned, good-hearted people get in there and just they seem to be, and the office has just got to be the most
yeah,
high pressure, corruptive environment, uh, toxic, everything.
yeah. It's money,
Um,
man. It's all that shit. But I mean, I guess
power,
to kind of
pressure.
get back to like the stuff of like communal living, I think, you know, I would say like
What
one of the
about
main things for me is that I actually really believe in community, like in a meaningful way. And it's part of the reason why, like, for instance, you know, to get away from politics and to sort of like focus more on the things that I'm interested in, which is like personal relationships. Like, for me, it's about like when I think about music, like, I think that's been a big part of that. You know, for me, music has always been about personal relationships. Like, I'm not really interested in playing music with people who are like shredders. I'm interested in playing music with my friends, you know. And if my friends happen to be shredders, great, you know. But like, I'm not, I don't care about that, you know.
yeah,
Like, I'll play with people who suck, supposedly suck, you know, and people who are fucking amazing.
right,
But what's important to me is like, how do I feel about them? You know, how do we spend time together? What's it like when we're in a room together? You know, like, what does it feel like? You know, like, and I
yeah,
think that like, to me, that's the thing that I kind of keep coming back to is like, how does it feel? You know, my teacher when I was managing that Buddhist center, she would always be like, where does it feel in your body? You know, you're having all this mind stuff. You're like have
yeah.
all these like mind objects that move around, you know, whether it's politics, whether it's fucking relationships, whether it's all this stuff. And it's like, she'd be like, where does it feel? Bring it into here. Where do you feel that? Do you feel it in your stomach? Do you feel it in your chest? Do you feel it in your throat? Like like how does it affect your sort of physical system? You know, and
Vipassana, baby.
yeah, I mean, and I think that that shit is like, I think, you know, I think we can get into the sort of headspace and like ideologies and blah blah blah, all that shit. And like half the time I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, but like I know how I feel.
Yeah.
I
Heart,
can
heart,
recognize
man.
how I feel.
Heart is
You
the
know,
the the best thing that I discovered in yoga practice. Um,
yeah,
this particular teacher had a way of drawing it out, we'll say, and it was all part of the magic I think she was intentionally wielding uh, to reach that heart,
yeah,
strangely, and it worked. It's like yoga
yeah,
is a great way to feel your body, just in a very different, the opposite way of Vipassana, which was my foundational practice.
yeah,
I didn't do yoga till I had already done the 10-day up there on Alaska, and
yep,
I was hearing like yoga is good for meditation, and I went to various gym classes, but you need a special teacher, I think, to draw a deeper relationship to it, or you get to a place in your life you're more mature, you're less self-conscious, you're less oriented on things other than just what's good for you. I guess I'm getting,
yeah,
although on the other hand, I'm playing with my vices a lot these days. So
yeah,
but I'm eating well, I'm dancing, I'm having fun, I'm doing yoga, I'm biking still, like all this stuff that keeps me
yeah,
young.
yeah.
um
It's great.
I'm kind of like getting drifted, but we do spend too much time. I see people that are just seem to be on Twitter nonstop. They don't do these things. You need to take the time out of your day to do these things. You don't have to drive to the store. You can walk if it's a mile away.
Yeah,
People won't do
exactly,
it. Um,
exactly.
but it's like, then on the walk, maybe you see somebody. It's just like,
Yeah,
and that's how this is where we really have drifted so far. This is where we agree. We tend to dis like our band, Death Worth Living. Like it was cooperative. We didn't have a.
yeah,
We didn't like. I was writing about it because I've been trying to write my memoirs about things. It's very therapeutic, but also I feel like it helps people understand all the years because I don't have a straight career. But Death Worth Living was like every time I tried to control it and have like a piece, it usually backfired or made it complicated and less enjoyable. But then when you entered and it basically became a trio with guests and it was just a free project, I think that like we had shows that were horrible. Like we had sets. I mean,
yeah. I
we'll
mean,
just say it sucked. We'll say like it wasn't. And then we had sets that were beautiful, and usually those are the
yeah.
ones that we didn't get on tape. But tape.
I mean, even the ones that like we felt not great about, like there's there's I mean, this is the thing, like for me a lot of it is always sort of process oriented, like so I think the experience is what's important for me, like the movement through, and this is something I've thought about a lot with music and art the last few years is that like you and I are sort of like one of the last generations of people for whom music isn't sort of like like inherently like product fixated, you know? And what I mean by that is that um, we lived at the last generation where there was cheap enough rents to have like weird art spaces where bands could play. Cheap enough rents where like a bar would just be like, yeah, you know what, you can have a show, and if
The
there's two
dream is
people
alive
here,
in
it's
Philly,
totally
brother.
fine,
The
you
dream is
know.
alive in Philly,
Sure,
brother.
I mean, yes, for the next what 5 years or something,
Yeah,
like
we'll see. We'll see.
um, it's that shit is closing down everywhere,
Yeah.
and the point I'm making is that you and I are sort of like this last generation of people who were immersed in that in where that was just how culture worked,
Yeah.
right? And now, because of the way culture works, when you first play out, you have to have something that's on, that's just perfect, that's like that works the second you get on stage. And so so there's a lot more of an incidence of like pre-recorded tracks. There's a lot more people writing songs that are these very like complex, like very like things that
Bro,
like over practiced, getting up on stage and just figuring it out as you
I
go along, not a
I've
thing
seen
anymore.
I've seen worse. It's this is something I've seen in the younger rappers in that I've seen in Philly,
Yeah,
that are just doing an informal kind of event.
yeah,
They're going on with a track that's fully produced, and they're talking to a blank mic, or they're talking over it, but not talking, rapping over it, and they actually can't do it. They're not they're dropping off constantly, getting off track. They can't
yeah,
do it. And I'm like, that's a very strange thing to me, that we're in a produced form of music primarily.
yeah, yeah. That's what I'm saying though. And the reasons for that are very much like economic, like they're very much a product of capitalism. It's like they're a product of like the market, like real estate. They're a product of people's main access to music being online, which means that it's inherently produced. It's like compressed. It's all these things. There's not the messiness of like
It's
being
interesting.
at a show and being bored and sitting through four bands that suck because you're hoping that like the last band is going to be awesome, and sometimes they are, and you're like, oh my god, I can't believe I stayed for like fucking whatever, like George's Teacup. Did you see George's Teacup? They're great. And it's like, and then next year it's like George's Teacup broke up, and it's fucking um, uh, Billy and the fucking hedgehogs, and it's the drummer from George's Teacup, and he's fucking sick, and it's like that that dynamic still exists to some extent, but it's very much being sort of eroded, and it's being eroded rather quickly. And I think that there's something in that loss of community, kind of tie up, get back to what we were saying, is like there's an in-person community that is very messy and that is very collaborative and that creates a lot of sort of like unexpected consequences that you can't get from Ableton by yourself in your bedroom. You
Yeah.
just can't,
Yeah, I
like,
see it. I see the energy and the intention of it. It is a very different context. Like the Philly now, what's happening here reminds me a lot of what was like Portland, like 2005. And
yeah, that's cool.
it is great. It's weird. I'm old, but like
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
been keeping trying to get younger so I can
yeah,
get into this and
yeah,
participate. Um, which is great. It's but the thing is, it's very different context. I wouldn't say it's the
yeah,
same.
sure,
I mean,
yeah, yeah,
that Portland was governed by
yeah,
local artists and
yeah,
anarchist leftists. That's how that city
yeah,
ran. It was
yeah.
cooperatives and worker-owned places all over the
I mean, I
place.
wouldn't
There
even
was
say it was like
well,
anarchist leftist, like it was just fucking artists. Like
yeah, yeah.
I didn't notice a
There was
particularly political bent to most of it.
right. That wasn't really, but the way things were governed, there's. I just remember I the first place I lived on was
Yeah.
26 and Clinton,
Keep
and we are
talking.
going to
My
try to
phone
wrap
is
this
literally
up.
about to die. Give me one
Oh,
second.
okay.
Let me grab my charger. Hold
Okay,
on.
but you can
I'm
hear me,
I'm
right?
still here. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can
Oh,
still
okay.
hear you. I got
Oh,
my
yeah,
thing.
you
So I'm
got your
just literally
Bluetooth.
like,
So
yeah,
I lived when I moved to Portland, I went to 26 and Clinton. And at 26 and Clinton, there was this beautiful corner. I fell in love with it. It was on that corner, there was like an artist, like locally owned theater, a
yeah, yeah.
local
The Clinton
local
Theater.
coffee shop. There was the Q is for Choir worker owned record shop. There was down the street there was the co-op food co-op, and down the street from another direction there was the worker owned Red and Black Cafe, and they bought
Sure.
their baked goods from the worker owned bakery. And yet
Yeah,
most generally the climate wasn't politically charged. People were just tolerating. They didn't ask about your ideologies or put it too in your face, but it was there,
yeah,
and it was the way that people lived. So I really
yeah,
value that. To me, like, this is my equivalent of you. This is the best. I There was 14 years, and watching that erode
yeah,
uh is but like those first 5-10 years were very valuable and informative to my way of thinking and living, and the way we played music, the way sex fucks was, all that stuff was extremely, and Shane, extremely informative and influential. And I value it a lot. And then I was really sad to see it erode over time, and just to see kind of like, I don't know how this relates, but I'm going to go for it. Last night, I've just been noticing this on so many dance floors. People are not on every dance floor. You can go to places. It's like one room to the next. It's one community to the next, kind of where you get something that's authentic and like you're talking about, just more like messy, but also in that just free way. But you go to a dance floor, like people are ironically dancing. They can't go out there and just dance. They're bringing their
Yeah.
phones out. It's like they start circles. Dancing circles used to be, this kind of pisses me off, to be honest. It's like a bad form of cultural appropriation. Dancing circles were like for really skilled break dancers to come in and light up the place while a great DJ was on. Now you have circles that are formed for people to ironically do bullshit. And I find it really fucking
Hmm.
annoying.
I don't
But
know.
it doesn't matter.
I,
I'm not
you know, I see it
resentful.
in a
I
totally
just,
different way because I don't think that dancing circles were started by rappers. I think people have danced in circles since time immemorial.
I'm talking about
And
discotheque style. You know what I'm saying? This is the era. I'm
but
talking about
no,
that
but
era. I'm talking
and
about
I'm
the setting
and
of a
I'm
disco.
and I'm 100% saying that like I think that that happened pre-rap.
Sure,
You
sure.
know,
But
I
it was
think
for
that
people to light it
people,
up. I mean, you could say what goes back
yeah,
to endless time, but people
but
would
I
light
mean,
it
my
up.
point, sure, but I think that like lighting it up is different for each person. You know, some people light it up by being funny. Some people light it up by being, skillful in a particular way. Some people light it up by, like doing something that sort of like might, like be like a connection, like a throwback to some, like let's say there's a video where there's a particular dance move in the video that was in that song that they're playing, and they redo that dance move. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to light it up,
I
and
agree,
so like
but light it up.
like
Don't get in there and it's like, I don't know why that connected. I thought it did. It's like it's just the authenticity, the being willing to be vulnerable, going. It's like dance floor is a community. You don't know who's out
sure,
there. You don't
yeah,
know what's going to
yeah,
happen.
yeah,
and and it's just when we can't just be comfortable in ourselves. I think that's a big product of the media,
yeah,
the boxes. That's what I'm getting at. It's like you see
yeah.
it
No,
in
I agree,
so
I
many
agree.
manifestations around us,
Yeah,
and that includes the live shows.
yeah.
When you would be sitting
I
there at
think when your
Valentine's
phone
and
is out at the live show, it's weird. I mean, I get it. I do it occasionally, and like I'll, like make a video of what's playing or whatever. But like,
if I want to share it to stories, I'll do it for 12 seconds, put it away,
yeah,
and then post
yeah,
it later.
yeah.
Like I
I think
just
having
can't
your
sit
phone
there.
out the entire time you're dancing or whatever feels weird.
Yeah, it's weird. Even holding a
Yeah,
drink. But I've seen these
yeah,
like parties where they're like making like intentional floors of saying there's gonna be no phones and no drinks, and you got
yeah,
and I really like that. I want to try that
yeah,
one of those.
yeah.
Probably
I think
draws the
that's
people who
great.
care the most.
Yeah,
We made it
yeah,
past the hour. I feel like we didn't get into your life. We did touch on music,
yeah.
but I
It's
think
fine.
there's a lot that you've lived that's worth getting into.
Sure.
Uh,
Yeah.
it's true,
I
man.
mean,
I mean, few people
yeah,
have as few people live. I mean, think it's kind of like we share this in common. We're willing to put ourselves into a van if that's the lifestyle choice we want for that minute.
yeah,
Uh, like,
yeah.
yeah,
True.
we've done a lot of random shit in our own ways, and I think that those stories are probably pretty good. And maybe you have a less political conversation in the future, perhaps.
I would love that. Yeah, I honestly, I realized as we were talking, I was like,
This sucks.
yeah, it's kind of a bummer, and
No,
it's
but
something that I've been trying not to do because honestly, I don't see that much value in like what are we going to accomplish in terms of our personal relationship and having that conversation.
yeah,
What happens with our personal relationship and what you and I have actually had happen in our personal relationship is create friction between us, and I don't want that.
yeah,
Like what I'd rather have between us is sort of mutual understanding and more closeness. You know what I
sure.
mean? And what I notice is that when you and I talk about music, when you and I talk about like when we've talked about like your business, when we've talked about like sort of things that are actually like that we have actual involvement in, like actual like hands-on like connection to, we find a way to feel close. When we talk about sort of ideas and like big sort of abstract bullshit, it 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 takes you away from your heart. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely. When I meet people now, and just which it's kind of like my local world is, and the people that are in my life are on my Instagram, right? And it's not a place where I'm political because of that reason. I'm, and when I meet people now, I just don't get into it. I just stay off topic, and I try to establish that practice as the normal. Like, we're not like, I just don't get into it because I know that my views always conflict with people, because I am discovering. I think it's a process of discovery. And so
sure,
what the good thing that we did here is demonstrate that it's possible to have a collaborative argument. And I think I think I learned a little bit from you. I think your example in life is good for people to hear, and we did it in a way I don't think anybody lost their cool. It was good argument, good conversation. So I'm happy we did it. But and I need practice.
yeah,
I'm gonna
I
keep
do too.
inviting the lefties on, but I'm also just trying to talk to people about their artists and all kinds of people about what they
Uh,
care about. That's kind of what this show is.
I mean, yeah, I think it's important to stay focused. Yeah, like I don't know. Yeah, I've been trying more and more to kind of focus on how, like, what are what do I have to bring to a situation? You know, like, what are my skills? What are the things that I can bring to a situation? You know, and
Yeah,
something that, like,
yeah,
I know I bring to situations is, you know, to some extent, like, a sense of humor and, like, the capacity to kind of, like, be insightful and be connected to people, you know, and then also, like, you know, a history of playing music and of making art of various forms. And, you know, and honestly, like, do I have a history of studying, like, political science? No. Do I have a history of studying economics? No. You know, like, and my opinions about it are actually, frankly, fucking irrelevant. You
well,
know,
we are
like,
dilettantes in a way.
you know, like, my
Yeah,
own opinions about that shit, you know, I even to me don't matter, you know, like, like, what I think our culture is really in the midst of is, like, people only want to offer opinions about shit that other people care about. You know what I mean? Like, that's literally what we're doing. We're always like, oh, that's a thing. Like, I saw that on Twitter. Let me have an opinion about it. And it's like, why don't, why? Who
yeah,
cares? Like, let it go.
yeah.
Like, it literally, it just doesn't, it so doesn't fucking matter. Like, until you are literally on the street with a fucking bag of socks, giving them to homeless people, like,
Yeah,
then fucking have some fucking
yeah,
opinions about the homeless population. But
yeah,
sitting in your house on Twitter, like, posting is not politics. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like, like
Right.
it just this is why I'm like, just like, oh fuck, man. Like, it's so hard for me to fucking, like, I get mad, like, I
Yeah,
get, like, worked up about it, and then I'm like, dude,
yeah,
that
yeah,
is a mind object. Like, just leave it
yeah,
alone.
yeah.
Come back to your body.
I totally
Like,
agree. I just don't have the ego for it anymore. Like, I can't argue. I mean, if I don't care about somebody, then I just got to let them go. If I care about them, then I can't just have arguments in my head with them.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, it's
yeah,
like,
it
and you can
sucks.
apply that across
It's
the
so
board of
toxic.
life. You can't just
Yeah,
be gobbling that up, and you can't force the head down, but you can let
yeah,
the gut, the information that's rising from the gut and the heart, and let the head then conduct itself in life, because that's what
yeah.
it's there to do. But it cannot direct life. And that's definitely my fuck up for the last 38 years preceding. Uh, but
Oh,
that's I think something that we all kind of have to learn in our own way. Hmm,
well,
fascinating times. It's a
yeah.
Matrix. This is what I rewatched the Matrix series, and I'm like, it's not that show is not about that movie series. Is not about It's not about the Matrix, a big simulation per se. Maybe there it is, because life is kind of like that. But I really think it's about our own individual matrices, our own programming, and the way that we program ourselves. So I've been on that tip I think that we need to deprogram ourselves and get control of our own matrix. And it's not control either, because that is part of the matrix. It's like control seems to be like the opposite of consent. And
Yeah.
when I want to control, and I think this is where we get into a lot of problems in politics, we want a government to control things so much we forget that we're what we've consented to. Well, also, like, I don't know, it's like it's a paradigm shift in my thinking and my whole kind of way recently is control to consent. And so now I'm asking, what have I given consent to? Rather than what do I control? What have I given consent to?
Sure.
And that opens up a whole battery of questions for another day. But
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
how my hungover. I think that was my thought when I woke up hungover, and I brought it in.
Yeah, yeah, and you were like, and then you
How
were
am I
like,
going to work this in?
you're like, I'm hungover. Did I give consent to being
Yeah,
this hungover?
yeah,
Like, what in me was trying to control my emotions so much that I had to fucking drink a bunch of alcohol to feel
yeah.
like, some
To light it up on the
process of,
floor, man.
yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know. I've been sober for a while now, and honestly, at this past festival, I haven't danced that hard and that much in years. And I was like, oh yeah, it's actually kind of better when I'm sober. Like, because I have more energy. I get more like just into like how my body moves. Like I'm more aware of it, like, and I just, I don't know, man. It was like a real revelation. It was like, wow, this
yeah.
is so much fun. Like it was
Someday I'll try
crazy.
that. I'll try it
It's
someday.
great. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, I can't,
I mean, I'll
I
be in the
recommend
middle
it.
of the day drinking coffee in my bedroom
Yeah,
because I'm listening
yeah,
to an awesome mix on Tidal,
yeah,
right?
yeah, sure.
Excuse me. Or I'm making my own music. I just put out
Yeah,
something that I really enjoyed. I don't know if you heard it.
cool.
I'll share.
Yeah, I haven't. I'll check it out.
Okay. I'm gonna take you off the stream here. This
Sweet.
is I had fun. I appreciate
Yeah,
this
same.
conversation a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah, it
Groovy
was
buddy.
lovely.
So
Yeah.
I wonder what this sounds like is on everything.
Yeah, Bandcamp, Instagram, and it's all one word. I wonder what this sounds like. I think I'm also on SoundCloud, although I honestly haven't looked at that in a really long time.
I'll force it because that's where I put that song. I'll make you go to
Um,
SoundCloud.
yeah, and then I'm like trying to think. Oh, I keep meaning to set up a Twitter account. I wonder what this sounds like, but
Let it go now. Twitter's not
eh,
good for that. It isn't.
yeah,
It's like running a brand on Twitter is weird.
yeah,
It,
yeah,
it doesn't. Yeah, it's interesting. I
yeah,
don't want to get political with my brand on, so I'm just like, "Bleh."
yeah, yeah.
All right, buddy.
So,
I had a great time. Love you.
yeah, likewise. Love you too. Thank you so much. Anyone who was watching this, if there was anyone, I appreciate everyone in the world.
Nobody
Thank you.
jumped in the
Mwah,
chat, but I've
mwah,
seen a
mwah,
couple
mwah.
viewers. And
Um,
it'll stay on the channel.
cool.
You don't have to go, but I'm gonna take you off the stream and then close it
Okay.
up. All right, that was good. Oh, do I still have some of his music playing? Oh man, it stopped. Oh well. Yeah, you can go here. I wonder what this sounds like. Music, where he mentioned, and I recommend that. I recommend being JP's friend. That's what we call him. JP, Japes, Jello Prism. He's had a number of names. That's it. This has been a good time. I invite more leftists on the show. Let's argue. Let's get into it. I love it. And I love you. Have a good day.